And Mr. Dukes was present for that conversation, correct?
Yes.
Okay. At the end of the conversation, do you remember Mr. Fox asking about immunity?
He asked for immunity for his client to testify, yes.
Let's talk about this. I have two great guests to break down the complicated legal issues in this case. Joining me right now, law professor Jeff Lax is with us, as well as trial attorney Sandra Spurgeon. It's great to have you both here. Jeff, I'll start with you as you are new to the program. Welcome to Law and Crime. What did you make of the whole back and forth yesterday? Because at the end of the day, Bo Dukes was never offered a deal. He was never offered immunity. The question, I guess, was he under the perception that maybe he would be protected in some way? And it just so happens that's when he comes forward and puts the finger on Ryan Duke and says, he's the murderer, not me. I just helped out after the fact. What'd you think?
Yeah, that's a trick sometimes that police, the FBI, and even through prosecutors use. They'll say, just tell the truth will help you out. It's kind of similar to what people see on TV, actually. Just tell the truth will help you. You do this for yourself. But that's not a promise. That actually has no legal impact at all. Unless you have something to sign, it has no use. So I do think, to answer your question, that probably somebody who's not sophisticated with knowledge of the legal system might be led to believe that if he just comes forward with the truth, or what he thinks in some cases, what the prosecution might want to hear, or what the police might want to hear, that they might be more enticed to do that. And to answer your other question, I am shocked personally that they don't have a deal yet. I mean, he's in a whole lot of trouble in several cases, as we know, and you've just reported on that. And considering the complexity of this case, and considering how important it is that the defense, that Ryan Duke, not be able to use that justification, that this guy is just saying this stuff because he wants to get out of something. I'm really surprised that there hasn't been a deal yet because he's got a whole lot of years in prison, no matter what, coming up. So I'm surprised something hasn't been worked out yet.
Well, Sandra, let's say you're representing. Does make you think a little bit, even though no deal was actually put on the table here, why he decided to speak with investigators. I watched that tape, where he is telling Agent Shadell, I've helped Ryan Duke burn the body. And he talks in this interview about how he kind of felt the need to get this off his chest. And I remember that when he was sentenced, he spoke out to the Grinstead family. He appeared to be emotional in court, saying how much how he was so sorry for deceiving them, not coming forward for so many years. Is that what it is? A guilty conscience why he decided to speak?
That wouldn't be my guess, but I know that's his position. My guess would be kind of what's being implied by a few people, which is he really did think maybe he was more involved than anybody knows, than he's letting on in his own testimony. And maybe there is some truth to the fact that he was involved in the murder itself. And if that's the case, it's a little bit of a leap. We have no evidence to suggest that at this point beyond what Ryan Duke might say. But if that is true, that explains a lot, right? Because that would explain why he thinks he might be helping himself, even without a formal offer of immunity or any kind of deal.
Well, Sandra, if we go to trial.
To that question.
Thank you, Judge. The interview that you had on February 19th, 2017, that was with Mr. Bowden, Mr. Rigby, Ms. Schwartz, and then your lawyer, Mr. Fox, correct?
Under the advice of counsel, I'm also going to invoke my Fifth Amendment right.
And it lasted approximately 30 minutes?
I'm also invoking my Fifth Amendment.
Thank you. And was it during that meeting that Mr. Bowden told you that if you cooperated and you were not involved in the homicide, but you were only involved in the cover-up, that they would be in a position to help you?
Under the advice of counsel, I'm invoking my Fifth Amendment right not to self-incriminate.
And it was shortly after Mr. Bowden made this statement to you that you made a statement that implicated Ryan Duke?
Under the advice of counsel, I'm invoking my Fifth Amendment right not to self-incriminate.
Do you believe that you had a deal?
Under the advice of counsel, I'm invoking my Fifth Amendment right not to self-incriminate.
In fact, did you then subsequently text friends of yours saying that you believed you had a deal?
Under the advice of counsel, I'm invoking my Fifth Amendment right not to testify.
Would you have given Agent Shaldell statements if Mr. Bowden had not told you he was in a position to help you?
Under the advice of counsel, I'm invoking my Fifth Amendment right not to testify.
Did you know Paul Bowden prior to this meeting?
Under the advice of counsel, I'm invoking my Fifth Amendment right not to testify.
And Judge, that one I would argue does not have any incriminating statements, whether or not he knew Paul Bowden prior to this meeting.
Well, Your Honor, being that Mr. Bowden was the
current district attorney in this case, any implications or testimony, anything that he had some sort of meeting with him or knew him in any way could incriminate him or lead to incriminating information.
Any further from the state?
No, Your Honor.
I'm going to require the witness to answer that question.
Personally, I did not know Mr. Bowden.
Had you ever met him prior to that day?
Not that I recall. It's possible, though.
Were you friends with his son, Josh Bowden?
Yes.
Had you ever been to the Bowden's home?
I can't recall a time where I ever was.
Thank you. No further questions.
Okay.
3:30 would not require him to reschedule anything.
Is that okay with you?
So it was pretty incredible to see both defendants in the same room. I hadn't seen that happen since this case broke. Jeff, I mean, what did we take away from that? It wasn't much. I'm not surprised he invoked his fifth, but what did you take away?
Yeah, that might have been the least surprising thing that happened. I think we all expected him to invoke the fifth, hearing that his attorney was going to be at his side. But I'll tell you, that is what we call in litigation a very uncoached well witness, a witness who was not coached well. He didn't stick to the script. And, you know, he was, even though the prosecutors were making some good points about things not necessarily falling into the, you know, the Fifth Amendment privilege, but still, he was supposed to say to every question, I'm invoking my right to plead the Fifth Amendment. And he did not do that. He answered a few substantive questions about Bowden being, whether he was at his home or not, family members who were at his home.
Right.
Didn't necessarily hurt him, but I was a little surprised to see that he was not well coached. They didn't have much time together, obviously, him and his lawyer.
Well, Sandra, what'd you make of that? So I guess the defense was trying to suggest there's a chummy.
Yes.
And the night of Mr. Hayes being a busy night in the ICU, that is not unusual.
No.
And in addition to the nurses and charging nurses and the physician on the ICU, there was always the capability of someone at the ICU also calling a rapid response nurse, such as yourself, correct?
Yes.
There's kind of like...
So I want to ask you, Jeff, what you think of this cross-examination. My take is they're really focusing in on the fact that these patients needed these high-level doses of medication, that it wasn't relieving the pain. Do you think this is effective, what you're hearing?
Very effective. I think Jose Baez set this up beautifully well, because what you've been hearing in the past few days and weeks is Mr. Baez showing that he's gotten other doctors to admit that, hey, we can't make these determinations without seeing the patient, without hearing the patient, without being involved in the actual care of the patient. So what are you hearing now? And Mr. Baez knew this was coming, that you're hearing this nurse talking about an 11, a 12. Look, these patients really wanted this. Look, I also agreed that it wasn't so crazy, and that's why I put it through. And I think Mr. Baez set this up beautifully. He knew this was coming, and it's turning out the way I think he expected this to go. Yeah,
well, you know, lead defense counsel, but he is working with a team there. They're all asking the same kind of questions to these different witnesses, and I think it is fascinating because it's kind of a thin line here for both the defense and the prosecution in terms of whether or not this was murder. So we're going to wait and see. We're going to take, we're going to continue our coverage out in Ohio. Jeff Lax, appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. Make sure to have you back on. Sandra and I are going to continue to follow the William